living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
Welcome to SPEDTalk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
Before the Storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is about making the impossible possible. So for SPEDTalk today, we're just super excited to have really representatives from TEA here to talk about Project Restore and to maybe even go above and beyond that and talk more about initiatives and things that are going on. But Jen, do you want to introduce, or do we want to just go around the room and everyone kind of introduce ourselves?
Well, we do have Project Restore here with us today. We've got Jordan and Eloy, but as we go through, I would like for them to just tell us a little bit about themselves, their background.
Awesome, and that sounds great. And I see we just had Kelly jump in as well, and we're going to take a minute and just have each of y'all introduce yourselves and just talk a little bit about kind of how you're tied to Project Restore and what your role is there at TEA. Eloy, did you want to jump in and just kind of go first?
Sure. So I'm Eloy Gangapadehe. I've been at the agency for a little over 2 years, and I'm wrapping up this week. So I'm excited to be on this today. And I work with the highly mobile and at-risk division, which Kelly manages and Jordan is a part of. I also work with the gifted and talented program, and I also work with the English learner support. And so basically that makes up the division of special populations, which is a pretty significant group when you think of all the student groups, and I'm sure Kelly will go over. And then we sit in the Office of Special Populations and Monitoring, and that's where I met you, John, is in the SPED space, right? So, you know, it's a significant amount of programs and students represented in the whole office. We're excited today to talk about Project Restore, genesis of it, and where it is today. So I'll tag into Kelly Kravitz.
Thanks, Eloy. So I'm the director of our highly mobile and at-risk student programs division and have been at the agency a little over 9 years. Our division focuses on students in foster care, students experiencing homelessness, students who are military connected, pregnancy-related services, child abuse, mandatory reporting responsibilities, including human trafficking, as well as mental and behavioral health and kind of new and expanding work that the agency is doing there. Eloy is going to be kind of handing the baton over as he leaves, and we'll just be continuing to promote Project Restore. We see this as like the most premier and progressive resource that the agency has ever released concerning trauma and trauma-informed supports for educators. And so we're really excited about that and really proud of it. Within our mental behavioral health space, there are a number of new requirements that the 86th legislative session had concerning trauma-informed training requirements. And so really proud that Project Restore is something that can be used to help districts in fulfilling those requirements. Specifically, we'll think about our students that we serve, though specifically, we know that they are adversely impacted by trauma, the effects of the pandemic, the compounded effects of trauma. We just are a huge champion and mouthpiece for equipping educators in trauma-informed resources and supports. That was a huge part of Eloy's, something that he did here and created and helped to lead. And so we're excited just to continue this on. It's right now, I think, the 7th most accessed resource on our webpage. And I'm just wanting to get it out into the hands of more people. The supplemental tools, they can be used in a variety of different ways. And so just excited for people to know that it's out and available. But that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. And I'll turn it over to Jordan.
So hi, I'm Jordan Brown. I am the Special Projects Coordinator for the Highly Mobile and At-Risk Division. So I've been at the TEA for almost 2 years now. And I currently oversee the Military Connected Student Program, a pregnancy-related services program, and I also support Kelly with our foster care and student success program, as well as the highly mobile and at-risk division overall. So I do quite a few things within the division. I started out at the University of Texas, so graduated and went right into TEA. I was studying international relations and also analyzing the effects of cultural differences in the classroom, and also working with formerly homeless individuals, as well as at the Capitol. And I came to TEA because I knew that educational attainment was kind of the key to answering many of the issues that we face today. And I love our division. I love the special populations division because we really focus on the students that need the most support. And we were able to come out with this amazing resource in the midst of COVID, in the midst of all the craziness, and really get it out for everyone who really needed it. So it was really awesome that we were able to do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank each of you for being here. You know, Niloy mentioned we had opportunities to kind of, as the liaison group, Niloy has joined us a few times. And I think as this Project Restore has evolved, had a chance to really kind of come in and tap our network, but also share with us along the way as Project Restore has kind of manifested itself into being this amazing resource. And I know when Niloy shared with us more recently, I guess with directors from around the ESCs and liaisons joined a group about a month or two back now. I was just blown away when I actually saw kind of the end result, Project Restore. And since then, I've been to the website, I've been checking out the modules, checking out the videos. I mean, it really is a timely, well-developed resource. And, you know, you mentioned, I think, Kelly, that it was like maybe the 7th most accessed resource on y'all's website right now. I bet it'll be the first in time, right? The number one, because mental health, we always know, affects all of us. And then we at SPEDTalk talk a lot about, you know, really just elevating and highlighting people of differing abilities. We all have our own way of navigating the world, but we all have those mental health concerns, right? We all have relationships. We struggle, like COVID has highlighted so many things for us. And students with disabilities are adversely affected, but also, you know, mobility. I grew up in a home where we moved a lot, and I was always 3 steps behind my peers, you know, and then, you know, mentioning Jordan, the military impact, right? That our kids that are growing up, you know, and the people making that big sacrifice, being our military, and yet still the kids so often move as a result of that. And we don't, as educators, always see those gaps, right? See those needs when kids come to us in the middle of the year, you know, at the end of the year, move out, move in, move on. And so I think that Project Restore does so much good in providing that resource, one that can meet those legislative requirements of our schools, but also just to fill that space right now, because more and more we realize mental health is something we have to pay attention to. So thank y'all so much for joining us today. Niloy, thinking about that, would you kind of talk to us a little bit more about kind of the beginnings of this project? How did this thing get, you know, start?
Sure. So backing up real quick, I joined the agency in March of 2019, and I had visited, I believe, 9 campuses, about 5 or 6 districts, did some of the visits through the commissioner visits to the ESCs, where you meet the ED and meet all the regional superintendents, superintendents of the region. And so to me, I'm talking about students experiencing homelessness, military connected. Jordan and I had actually visited Killeen ISD in December, right before the holidays. It was like really close to a holiday break. So fast forward to like late April, early May, late March, early April during the pandemic. And I go back out as we're thinking about developing resources to talk to 7 superintendents. And the number one topic that each of the superintendents brought up, 1 or 1A, was this idea about concern for students, families, and staff around mental health and emotional well-being. And I thought, okay, of course, I know that this is going to be the primary concern of people, but it's got to be an adjustment for folks who haven't been talking about it and haven't been thinking about it, right? So, you know, in many states we talk about social emotional learning. That's not the language we use here. And so quickly, I knew that there were going to be proposals submitted at the agency to determine how we go about spending CARES funding. And so I had a chance to talk to the commissioner, and we put forth a proposal to develop an online trauma-informed series, knowing like we don't know much about what it's going to look like in the summer or the fall. But we actually know that right now there are students, staff, students, families experiencing significant amount of trauma, right? Like there's like economic distress, there's like food scarcity, just, you know, during times like this, when people are cooped up, we know that there are more cases of reported abuse and unreported abuse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Every time was really challenging. We had put out a mental health, like emotional well-being, like video that was animated back in, I think, June, to kind of talk about here's what you can be expecting right now with your students or your children, and here's what you can do. And so that was great for 2.5, 3 minutes, but thinking about onboarding during the summer and preparing staff to tackle the issues that students have experienced from March, April, May, June. So we wanted to create something. So we created this proposal to basically develop an online trauma-informed video series. And I know you had asked us to share a little bit of experience before. And so my experience with trauma-informed care was really around my time in New Orleans. My last 4 years of running a single site LEA, we brought in Tulane University, LSU. We spent a significant amount of time with some other not-for-profits that were supporting this work. And what we talked about was mental health, but we created processing and systems for our staff to implement with our students around trauma-informed practices, right? And it was hard. It was about 55 to 60 hours in person, and it was overwhelming, right? It wasn't digestible, and I kept pushing it, right? But I could see why there was lack of buy-in. It was just too much, and it's like it was an extreme makeover. And, you know, it's funny, Kelly's on this call. I had asked Kelly for some wellness tips, and Kelly made it super digestible. But depending on who you ask, you know, Kelly was like, do these 3 following things, try it for a while, and then I'll move on to the next thing. But we were getting 50, 60 hours that was intense, right? Summer PD, every so often, it was very much like, here's a plan to transform your physical health. People couldn't do that, right? And so we wanted to make the videos really simple, whether you were in the trauma-informed loop or you were someone that was new to this. Like it was like a nascent stage of development in your educational career. And so we launched a request for proposal. We received significant amount of strong proposals. And then we found a vendor that was going to be able to work with us around the content and then work out highly aesthetically pleasing and engaging videos, right? And so we talked about where we want to embed animation. So basically we put this out, right? And then the idea was, okay, I have an idea. Some of us at the agency, we have some strong mental health and emotional well-being folks around the agency on our across our division, across the office, but it was like, and across the agency, but what else, right? So basically what we did is we worked with a vendor. We would develop scripts. We would get feedback from internal stakeholders that were mental health professionals that had that background. So counselors, social workers, and then school psychologists. Then we would throw it back out to external stakeholders who would give us feedback from ESCs, LEAs, and HHSC, for example, other nonprofits. And then we would tweak and adjust and revise. Then we developed the videos, right? Got a narrator, promoted diversity by gender, by race, and wanted to make sure that that was depicted both with students and staff, as well as during the animations, but also with the narrators. Then we would put out the videos, right? So we teamed up with a couple of LEAs and we ran focus groups. Then with Teach Plus, another organization that about 50 teachers, and we would bring people on and they would give us honest feedback, right? Have 45-minute to hour session to watch these 30-minute videos, stop the clip and say, okay, here's this worked, this didn't work, this worked, this didn't work. Then through a basic format where people can go in and watch the video and give feedback on Framio, we brought it back. So multiple iterations, right? But we were up against time, right? Because we knew we had to get the videos out at a time when they would land. And so, you know, early on, let me back up. We knew what were the most important topics, right? Like, what have you experienced, right? A lot of times we talk about self-care for educators as the last piece of the puzzle. So my experience in New Orleans was, we're going to bring that on at the end of the day. And even in like workshops in Texas, I noticed when I see the agenda, it's like the last thing. Like you want to embed that in the beginning. You want to get people hooked to think about self-care. And so the first video talks about like trauma and its impact, brain science for both staff and students. And then we talk about like what the educators have experienced, right? Thinking about self-care, building resilience, which is so important.
Yes.
This has happened, but like, then what? Then after that, we talked about what did students experience? And here's the thing about the pandemic, right? You talked about, John, you were vulnerable and you shared a candidate story about moving around, right? Mobility, right? We assume that students in low-income homes or economically disadvantaged have it worse off in some cases. And that tends to be true around mental health and emotional well-being, especially because of adverse childhood experiences. We can go back and say, well, look at the number of ACEs they've experienced. But during the pandemic, this was cutting across all walks of life, all races. So you had high income, middle income, everybody was experiencing, right? And all of a sudden it became like, I'm going into people's homes online, they're coming into my home. So how do I partner with students' families? In a lot of low-income communities, people do home visits, right? They connect with families. That's not something that's expected across the state. And so we heard loud and clear the feedback from educators to say, we're excited about you to have a video about with students' families, because that's not something we do. So I mean, basically, right, like it was an iterative process, but we were hitting on what we feel to be the most important when you think about what people across the world have experienced and thinking about in classroom in the state of Texas and connecting with families and educators. Like, so we're going to hit you with, what is trauma? What's the impact? We're going to hit you with, what have you experienced, right? We've all experienced it. We spend a lot of time, Kelly, Jordan, we have a weekly closing circle talking about what we've experienced. I know, John, I talked about it briefly. We've all experienced it in staff, right? So then on top of that, students in homes across the state, they've experienced something. What are they experiencing? And how do you build resilience? Then it's like, how do you build relationships, whether it's in the hybrid model, in person, right? So this is actually PD that's beyond trauma-informed care. It's like classroom management 101, but about relationships. Like, how do you go about doing that? Again, through a computer, in person, in a hybrid model, and then building strong partnerships with students' families, right? What does that look like? Written communication, texting, phone. What messages can you deliver to alleviate stress from students' families right now during this time? And so again, agnostic to socioeconomic status, families are all pressed right now to all of a sudden taking care of their children and schooling them at the same time and experiencing pain points with technology, experiencing pain points with like adjustments to lessons and modifications. So I think part of the reason that this resource has worked really well, it's because you sit on a computer for 30 minutes, you pause, you reflect, it asks questions, the heavy lift is on you. So say you're a building leader, right? And you're like, I don't have a counselor on my campus, or I don't have a mental health professional, and I can't coordinate with the district to set someone up. We have a facilitation guide for each video that you just have to read off of, right? So basically what you're actually doing is probing your staff, paraprofessionals, teachers, coaches, to think about their own experience during this time, but also what they know for students and making it very, very personal. Think about a student that has experienced X, Y, and Z beyond the pandemic. You know, the commissioner, it's clear that he didn't want this to get the virtual dust, right? And so the beauty of this is, yes, it's during the pandemic, but I would argue that there is no resource, Kelly highlighted this before, that does the job of what trauma-informed training does. It's the best in the country, hands down, right? So it's actually the #1 resource that's used. It's the number 7 most visited site since it developed, but really it's the #1 resource that's out there in terms of numbers. And look, yes, you can get continuing professional units, right? You can get a certificate, right? And you can get the SB11 and check the box for training. But the beauty of this is, right, you could have gone to the training in the spring, but as you come on the fall and now you've had the at-bats, you can think through how things are going to look differently, right? I think the biggest concern was when we flipped public education on its head in that fateful weekend in the middle of March around the country, less than like 3% of teachers used to like personalized learning in the virtual space.
You know, kids are pretty resilient, and looking at this resource and looking at the information, if I had had this resource 15 years ago when we were moving around, we were mobile because of the jobs that we held back then. My husband and I were both working with the federal government. So we were having to move every three and a half years. And so my kids were having to move from school to school. Like I said, if we'd had this 15 years ago, it would have been a lifesaver for me as a parent also. What's out there? Do you guys share this with parents also? Or is this, I mean, how would you recommend going about doing that?
Well, I mean, I will say this, there are initiatives rolling out in the next few years that's not immediate that I think will connect will connect educators with families in a different way, and they're going to be pushed by the agency for the first time, I believe. So we're just barely scratching the surface. We have a few videos that, like I was alluding to the video that we rolled out in the spring, that kind of like what has been going on and what you can do. We have not put forth at the level with Restore for families. Now, again, this is accessible to everybody, right? So there are things that families can learn immediately because you can put into practice. So right now, I would say educators who are parents or guardians themselves are probably getting a lot out of the videos. And in fact, to slightly pivot, whether you're just an adult and you watch the second video, when it talks about creating a protective buffer plan or a resiliency plan, it's just like super simple, right? Resiliency map, excuse me. And it's like, wow. And, a lot of times people are getting self-help books, or they're downloading podcasts, or, listening to audiobooks, which are great. It's all in one place, right? So there are literally 7 or 8 strategies. And then again, you don't have to roll out all of them, but just take one, build a protective buffer plan. And what this video does, it makes you think about the pain points and challenges that you're experiencing, right? And so when you're looking at watching the video, and that's why I think it'd be great, Jen, to your point about a parent watching, saying, hey, around this time every single day, I'm getting stressed out. And I usually have, my partner, my friend, but during the pandemic, that doesn't exist right now. And so unfortunately, we don't have anything in place now, but anybody can watch the videos and learn from them. And we're super excited by that. But right now, I would say that educators who are parents or guardians themselves are doubling down and watching this. And I think that, again, just to be clear, like, there is a long-term play, right? Which is, let's get Restore and other toolkits and training and framework and working through that to like change behavior and change practice at a school level, right? But what this is temporarily, if you're just in a building by yourself and the school is not ready to transform its culture or think about trauma-informed practice, it's okay. Because you can watch this video and change your practice and the behaviors and see results immediately. And so say there's Kelly's teaching down the block, or not down the block, sorry, down the hall. Jordan's teaching down the ball. John, you're teaching down the hall. And Jen, you're teaching down the hall. What's powerful is if a school decides, hey, we're going to go all in on this, right? So like, we watch the first video, a week later, we revisit, where are we? What practices are we bringing in? Or we watch the second video, then it's consistent. So if Ms. Kravitz is a middle school 7th grade ELA teacher, and Mr. Bouillon is a 7th grade math teacher, and Ms. De Leon is a 7th grade science social studies teacher, right? And Jordan is Ms. Brown is a special education teacher, and I'm Mr. Gangapati, the physical education coach, and I'm coming in, and the 5 of us are working together, then students know, okay, there's a consistency. Okay, Ms. De Leon is using this process. They're not going to know it's because of the Restore video, but it's walking through the steps to say, we're going to all work on developing relationships. So imagine how powerful it could be if everybody on a campus adopted the practice, right? And so one thing that's missing from Restore is kind of walking the school on how to do that, right? That would ideally be our next lever, like that we would want to pull. But for now, again, if you're in an isolated space and there are folks that might or might not be bought in, watch the video and start changing practice immediately.
Yeah. I love that, Niloy. I love how you drew out kind of Kelly's really making things actionable, simplifying really complicated information in a way that is digestible. I find that so often, even when an LEA or when a system will adopt initiatives, programs, ways to move culture forward, so, we spend so much time in the theory of it, and we kind of lose sight of how to actually implement it with actionable small steps daily that people feel like they can digest and do, And so I love that example you gave when you talked about your experience in New Orleans and how, at times it felt like there was just so much and it was good stuff, but like, what are we doing really? How are we moving forward? And yet there's a way to take all of this great stuff and kind of, refine it down to like, okay, what is my action step? What is my takeaway? How might I move this child forward, this group of children forward, if I were to do just this one thing or these 2 things instead of not doing these things? And so, it's funny when you think of educators, so many of us parents, you think, well, there's not an educator out there or a parent out there that doesn't want the best for their kids, right? And so, but it's just not quite knowing how to take the right action at the right time with all of the just the contextual stuff going on in our own children's lives. It's hard to know, hey, do I confront? Do I not? Do I support? Do I not? Do I limit? Do I not? Where's my boundaries? Where's the, those things. And then you introduce that responsibility to educators in the classroom with just kids that sometimes, bring even more need to them. And so it is a complex process. So I love the idea of simplifying implementation. That's kind of a note I took when Niloy was talking about. It seems like that's one of the goals of Project Restore is, look, this doesn't have to be an all or none thing. You can move culture by yourself in your classroom. Here's some examples, some simple steps you can take. And really it's around dialogue. It's around, as an LPC, as a counselor, I used to talk with students and clients about, listen, the work we're doing here in counseling, that's not the work. The work happens when you take the things you've learned and decided you want to change or improve about yourself.
Amen. Amen.
Implement in the world. You implement in your lived experience. That's the work. What we're doing is just play. We're just playing, right? But then you take this and apply it. And by making it actionable, I feel like Project Restore it's applicable, but it's applicable as well. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, man, you got me fired up. I'm also working on not interrupting, both personally and professionally. So I tend to interrupt people, so I waited. So I think what's interesting, man, is like, look, so I came in, I'm a believer in this, right? I'm talking your LPC, right? You get it. To me, it's as simple as this, and I don't think we think about it. If you're having a bad day, right? You got an argument with your partner, you got some bad news about your parent, or you got some financial distress, or your coffee mug broke, right? You're good. Like, that's hard to shake off, right? Some people can put things into compartments. Oh, that's my personal life. If I'm struggling with something, right, it's going to weigh on me heavily. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be able to process. And I go hard, but look, I'm going to get impacted, right? So I can't, and so when I think about, we do so much, right? We're familiar with ESF, EDF. That lever 3, culture, is so important, right? And I would argue that building relationships is the key piece, right? So whether you're managing adults or you're working with students, that's such a key driver. And I think we got to start pounding the pavement and making it work. So indirectly, this resource was like triage, right? Here we go. And over 90,000 educators have had one touch point with it, right? Which is amazing, right? It's more than 1 out of 4. That being said, though, right? It's like, that's why, during the meeting that where I met, reconnected with you with the liaison meeting, I said, let's stop. We'll think about this. Have y'all done this? Like a protective buffer plan, a resiliency map, because we as adults don't think about it that often, right? Yeah. Like we think about physical health, right? We're like, okay, you stubbed your toe. Great. Oh, Jordan, I hope this doesn't happen. You broke your arm. Oh man, what's wrong? Or, oh, you got, your foot. But folks have mental health issues all the time, right? And folks have emotional well-being issues all the time. We don't take that into consideration as much. I think it's significantly versus 15 years ago, right? But I think ultimately, right, like, well, we want to continue to pound the pavement on this resources, right? It's like, it's also great for adults. And I want to go back real quick on this piece, you're building resilience. It's embedded in every freaking video. There, it's embedded to think about self-care and building resilience, because I think that part is so key. And then I think if you're constantly thinking about your mental health and emotional well-being, just like, hey, I get a physical, where's my cholesterol level at, my triglycerides at, right? What's it looking like for potentially diabetes, right? So, gotta change my diet. Oh, gotta reduce my cholesterol. We don't think about mental health and emotional well-being, but because we embed the self-care piece throughout the series, we're hoping that adults are like, I gotta change my behavior for myself, but then also continuing to reinforce, you have to do that with yourself, you have to do that with your colleagues, you have to do it with your families, and also with your students, right? And so it's like I always laugh, right, about the plane where they said, you have to take, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Yeah. And I think we've, super intentional, right? Really thoughtful partners developing this, and the feedback with the, 250 plus people that gave us feedback and the iterative process to get the videos to the final product. That was a big thing, right? I think people really appreciate saying, wow, y'all really are serious about the self-care piece.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting on something, Eloy, you know, that wellness piece. And I think I would say there's just a heightened sense of awareness of it because of COVID, and because so many, you know, humans are not meant to be isolated. We're just meant to be in our homes, whether with children or without, with partner, without, but just to be in one space all day long in a box. Just, you know, I talk to my kids all the time about, look outside. You see that outside, the nature you see out there? That's what we're meant to be. We were brought into this world to be out in the world, not staring at a box, inside a box, living through other people's experiences, you know, me and my crazy mom on TLC or whatever, you know, and that's not normal, right? I mean, that normal is for us to be out in nature, living with other human beings. And in this, so in some ways, I think that we talk about silver linings a lot. I feel like COVID in some ways has opened the eyes of people. Some people, I'm not touchy-feely, I don't need this, I don't need it. But I would argue there is not a single individual in our state, nation, I bet in the world, that has not been impacted in a way that they've stopped, they've paused, they've said, this is difficult, I need help, I need a lifeline, I wish this wasn't so hard today. And so in that moment lies the opportunity for us to connect. And, you know, in SPEDTalk, we talk about, like, in this disconnected world, it's never been so important than to stay connected, you know? And so I feel like, you know, we're hiding the peas in the yams a little bit here. I love how you said we're embedding the wellness into this. So some people hear wellness and go, oh, I'm not into that fluff. No, it's not fluff. That is upfront important. You drop the oxygen mask so you can get oxygen, so you can care for others. My wife's a healthcare administrator. What do we do in education, healthcare? We care about everybody else, and we martyr ourselves a lot of times, and we don't tend to our mental health, our needs. And so I love that Project Restore embeds that. And it's like, listen, we want you to be able to take these resources and help others, but it's got to start with you. We've got to have something here that empowers you, that provides you that sense of resilience and hope, right? That feeling of hope, and makes it actionable. So Kelly or Jordan, would y'all talk a little bit about the facilitation guides, or is that something Eloy should jump in on? Like a little bit more about how those facilitation guides can be used. You mentioned those, Eloy, a little while ago. And I know I would love for our listeners that haven't maybe found Project Restore yet, and they're going to go look for it, to know, hey, I want to watch out for these facilitation guides, and how would I use those?
Yeah, I'll model because you know, after today, Kelly and Jordan are on their own. So yeah, so basically, look, because this is I asked Jen, so thank you, Jen, for kind of walking me through what it's going to look like. But because I thought it was going to be a Zoom where we could play around with the website. You go on the website. Underneath the video, on the left side of each video, it says facilitation guide, right? And basically it's super simple, right? Like, it walks you through. So basically everybody shows up, either if you're brick and mortar, we can project it on the screen, or everybody does it virtually, or however you want to do it, right? And the person, school leader, instructional coach, mental health professional, teacher leader, whoever it is, they basically print it out or look on their screen and they kind of walk through it. So the videos are time-stamped. Of the facilitation guide, there's timestamps that says, okay, we're going to start the video. There's some questions about the objectives. It's always a review of the material that we covered last video. And so there's pausing, right? And so what's great about it, doing it as a team, is that through the chat function in general, or in person, when you're facilitating it, you hear the dialogue a little bit back and forth, right? The ping pong. And, you know, people are supposed to share out, and it's up to the facilitator then to call on a few individuals, whether it's cold call, which I love, or just in general get people engaged and respond. And then people can kind of think and process. There's pausing there, and you know, critical moments in the video. So that's why the PD sessions, even though it's a 28 to 32 minute video, those first 5 takes 90 minutes. It takes up to 90 minutes. Sometimes it takes 75 minutes, right? And the facilitation guide kind of walks you through. And we really developed that with the facilitator not being a mental health professional. And I think because the idea here is that, again, we know with the sheer numbers that sometimes, even though a district might average 1 per school, there might not be a mental health professional there. And here's the other thing. I want to be clear, like, and I know you probably experienced this, John, and Jen, you probably experienced this. too often in schools and school systems, the heavy lift on mental health and emotional well-being is done by mental health professionals. It is getting mental health professional your way out of issues that students are facing on a daily basis or staff are facing. You have embedded in your culture. It has to become a way of life, right? So it can't be like, oh, we do this from 7 to 2, or that's in that class. And that's why I was giving the example of all 5 of us, which is middle school. So I think you got to pound the pavement on that piece. And so I think it's really important for everybody on the campus to participate and actually have a not mental health professional lead the session and kind of take it from there. And look, that's just a basic facilitation guide. I would argue that someone who's a little bit more experienced and a PD savant could probably tweak and adjust it. You know, they could probably, if they wanted to, they could break up one of the 30-minute PD sessions and split up the videos and do it, you know, be a little bit different and creative in that way. You know, 90 minutes, I get it as a lot. I think what's interesting to me is that right now we have found that people are far more willing to say, go to town during a planning period and before school, after in the evening, on the weekends, to watch this video, right, series, as opposed to actually bringing people together. We obviously have some LEAs that have done in Texas School for the Deaf, which is incredible, but I feel like there's just strength in numbers, right? It's so powerful. Individuals together, have someone lead it, have the dialogue, show the video, then 1 week later, bring everyone together, then connect again, right? Continue to have the conversation and dialogue to say, okay, we learned about trauma, we learned about building relationships. Who can share some examples or anecdotes of what worked this week or some pain points?
Yeah, it's that professional learning community, right? It's like Nilo, it's like you're creating, and I'm terrible about interrupting too, I apologize. But it's like you want to create within your system these professional learning communities. And I feel like that's one of the things we do with SPEDTalk is we try to create this extended learning community where people can come, they can talk, they can listen and contribute, and then go back and then pick one thing and say, hey, I'm going to try this, and then maybe regroup and say, hey, how did that work? Did anybody try that? And if, no shame. I mean, if you did and it didn't work, take the failure bow, right? And let's learn together and go forward instead of feeling like failure is a terrible thing. And so, I feel like you're hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's key, again, to do this work, not in isolation, but again, not to contradict what I said before, you can learn a ton by yourself. It's just better to have strength in numbers. And again, one part that we still want to build off of this is how do you help transform culture in a building, right? But this isn't about that piece now. Right now, we just feel like even if you watch the 6 videos in the spring or last fall, it's important that you continue to watch it because you're going to it's like, watching a movie that is dynamic in nature, right? Where you got to watch it a couple of times. And again, you're a different person than you were a year ago because of what you've experienced, right? And I don't want to, how do I describe this? Like undersell the actual physical impact. We lost nearly 500,000 lives in the US. And so many of our students, particularly immigrant students, have families back home, whether it be India, whether it be Brazil, where millions of people have died, tens of millions of people have died. And so even though as a country, we're building and we're coming back and folks are getting vaccinated and we're in a better place and we're trying to reach herd immunity, it doesn't change, especially when you think about disproportionately when it's impacted Black and Latino families, just significant families in Texas, that COVID hit hard. And so in general, when I'm preaching to the choir here, but about grief counseling, right? And being there for people. What do you think people have experienced when you didn't know what this was been going on for the past year? When people have been hospitalized, people have died, right? People are still suffering ailments, repercussions from contracting COVID. And I think that's a place, right? And I think about the other big piece in terms of actually qualifying what adverse childhood experience we've experienced. It's when people have been at home for a year, right? And people were unemployed, it leads to toxicity, right? In a space that generally hasn't been the case, right? And so I think what we're realizing too, right, is that over the past year, educators learned a ton about their families that they probably didn't know about and vice versa, right? And so I think that it's really critical to sort of embed this next year, still hanging your hat on the COVID piece, right? Because I think there's still some ramifications and will continue for a while. And then long-term, something that Jen said, hey, this tool will stand across time, because even though the impetus of this, the catalyst was COVID, the practices and processes still hold.
Yeah. Yeah. In design thinking, we talk a lot about designing kind of to the edges of society, to the edges of our groups, and to find that extreme user, right? And COVID, I think, created a ton of extreme users, right? We need these kinds of resources. But the magic really happens when we design to the edges for that extreme user, but we find that universal need. It's that universal product. It's that universal solution to something that people didn't even know, maybe, wholeheartedly that there was this need for this, because we all live in these systems and in these vacuums that we feel like, that doesn't happen to me, or that doesn't happen at our school, or the disabilities that are not visible, the mobility that isn't always visible, the learning needs that aren't visible, the mental health needs. And so if nothing else, it created this space, right? The context in which this product has been able to be iterated to the point where now it really is this great product that trauma-informed, simplified processes, digestible content, and I think that's when the magic happens, is when something can be designed, taking that stakeholder feedback and building on that. So Kelly, I know you mentioned you've been with TEA for 9 years now, and I know you've got tons of experience in highly, highly mobile and those areas. And is this an area you feel like, fits well within your department? And I see it growing in TEA's kind of repertoire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I just am proud that we have now a resource to really offer and point people to. I mean, we have had resources and things on our website, but I think the practical nature of the videos and the facilitation guides, and as Niloy mentioned, like, no matter where you are, you can use this or parts of it. Like, it doesn't have to be everything all at once, but it's those simple and actionable steps that you talked about. And so I think it just provides an opportunity to say, here's something that TEA has, now go do it, and we're just continuing to build out the work of our division. We've been around for just over 4 years. And so in the big scheme of things, we're a relatively new work stream at TEA, and really working to increase awareness and to build capacity and infrastructure, within Texas schools for serving our most highly mobile and at-risk kids. And this definitely fits with that. And I desire that this conversation around trauma and wellness would not just be something for the other, but it would become the norm and the mainstream. And I think COVID, as you mentioned, has forced us all to stop in our tracks, regardless of where we are and who we are and our beliefs around this, to say, oh man, this is hard and I need to take care of myself, and we do need to prioritize this, and our mental health does matter, and we are impacted, and it's okay to say so.
We generally have, as a PLC, we have 30 to 45 minutes, generally during conference times. So we could take a video, we could watch it, and then we could process it and reflect on it, and come back the next day or come back the next week and really be able to digest it and discuss it and implement some practices and put those in place as a PLC, as a team. You could also do it, at a staff meeting. So there are different ways that you could implement these. I see the value in these resources that you guys have put out there. And like I said, just the idea of educating general education educators outside of special education to recognize issues that, the triggers that could be causing the behavior and all of that. So I love these resources. I was excited when I started digging through them and looking at them. And like I said, as our jobs as liaisons, how they would fit into the work that we do when we go out and work with districts and campuses.
Yeah, I think they fit seamlessly with the work that we're doing because we're going into these schools every chance we get and working with, educational leaders, at times teachers, and really trying to help connect them to resources that empower, the adults in these systems, maybe to think a little differently, maybe to realize there's options, right? You always have a couple options, and we have habitual behavior is always going to be that inertia that we push against, right? Because we develop habits in the classroom, habits in life. But that being said, I strongly believe educators across our state really and truly are there wanting to be the difference, be the light, make the change. And they just need to have access to these resources and know that there are things out there like Project Restore and so many of the other technical assistance resources that are coming out of TEA that really and truly do serve that purpose and enable them. And the best thing about it is you don't have to spend a fortune on private vendors when you have a state agency that's moving in that direction, that support oriented direction. Like, listen, we're always going to need, people out in the business world to fill gaps from time to time. But more and more and more, I've seen, the commissioner take a stance all the way down through all the different departments. Look, we have to create these resources for schools. If the legislature is saying you must, you shall, then hey, we should be able to enable them to must and shall these things that they must and shall. So that's what I love about the movement. You can always have naysayers. There's always a reason, some people want to stay stuck in a problem versus look for those solutions. Yeah. But for people out there that want solutions, that are looking for different ideas, different approaches that cost nothing other than some blood and sweat, hopefully not the blood, but the sweat. Yeah. Like Niloy said at the beginning, look, it's hard, it's difficult. Changing culture is never easy, but at the end of the day, our kids deserve it. Our staff, our teachers, my wife's a healthcare administrator. I say it all the time. She's on the front lines. Our educators are on the front lines too, right? We've all been out there, and our teachers across the state and across the nation, educating kids, flipping the model just on a dime. The amazing work they've done. This enables them to just move that more efficiently and effectively for their kids. And so I love having y'all on today. I'm so blessed and thankful to have the opportunity to highlight this kind of work, because I feel like Jen and I and Pam wasn't able to be here with us today, but we just get so charged up every time we have, folks like you on, and hearing about the amazing things that are happening in Texas around the area of education, special populations. We're really rewriting the script. And that's from the state agency all the way down to the local level. So thank you guys for coming on today.
Kind of wrapping up, it took COVID to be able to recognize mental health issues in general, not just because of COVID, but it made it safe to talk about mental health issues. And so for that, despite COVID being what it is, I think I have to appreciate that, because it brought people closer together. It made awareness, it was an awareness awakening for issues, like such as these. I want to pull Jordan into this, putting out new resources and pushing out the resources that we have now. One final thought, Jordan, as far as what do you foresee in the near future, in the next few months with Project Restore and the mental health system and the issues that are going on?
I'm really hoping that we can further integrate the training into, reaching out to maybe nonprofits, getting it integrated into school training, making sure that everyone who can access is accessing. I know we're really focusing on getting every LEA in the state to participate in the training in some form or fashion. And so just getting those numbers up and making sure the breadth we talk a lot about in our division now, like we want to make sure that we reach as many people as possible in as many places as possible in Texas, because we know we're such a big state. And so getting to those people in those, rural areas, smaller districts is really important to us. We have buy-in. Like you said, I totally agree. This has really given us the opportunity to generate buy-in for mental health and awareness of these issues.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. We definitely appreciate you joining us and sharing Project Restore with us, with our listeners. We're excited to be able to push this out. And John, any last words, any last thoughts?
No, just blessings and gratitude. I always love having just this opportunity. I feel like there's just a lot of hope and positivity out there that can be shared. And it's super exciting to know that Project Restore is out there and that there are people in need right now that are going to hear this episode. They're going to log on to Project Restore and they're going to benefit from it personally, and they're going to let it flow through them to others. And so thank you both. and let Neloy know we really appreciate the time that you've given us today. You're Sped Talkers now. Pam would say, hey,
We're
if you ever-
excited.
yeah, now that you've been on Sped Talk, you're part of the family. If you ever want to jump back on, if you've got a you're rolling out or things that you want to get out to our listeners, feel free to just email us, reach out. We'd love to have you back on and continue this conversation. Okay.
Awesome.
That sounds great. We've got a lot of resources that are coming, and it's great to be able to share with you all and to continue to help you have us push stuff out. So thank you. Thanks for championing this. We really appreciate your time today and for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
John, tell everyone how they can continue to elevate the conversation about special education in Texas.
You got it, Pam. They can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at SPEDTalk 2020. Because in these disconnected times, connecting with others has never been so important. Now more than ever, it takes courage to create culture and kindness to keep us connected.
If you enjoyed this episode of Sped Talk, be sure to share it with a friend because information should always flow through us, not to us. We couldn't do this without you, our listeners, and we need your help sharing the amazing transformation occurring in special education. Together, we can change the trajectory of learning opportunities in Texas for students with disabilities. If you have ideas, information, or resources that you think we should share on an upcoming episode of Sped Talk, let us know at SPEDTalk 2020 on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And be sure to like our page while you're there. Oh yeah, and if you get a chance, please consider giving us a positive review on the podcast platform that you listen to Sped Talk.
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.